and made me feel like I was gross, feel like I was just not worthy of, of proper love, and just less valued. And
We may look different and live in different countries, yet our stories are knitted with the same threads of excitement, uncertainties, challenges, and victories. As we journey through the ups and downs of life, it is our undeniable will and God's strength that propel us to joy after pain, smile after frowns, and ups after downs. We were born to win. We were destined to greatness. We are overcomers. Welcome to GodScoop's raw and unedited stories. Welcome to Raw and Unedited Stories, the place where stories are told to uplift, encourage, and brighten your day. With us today is a special woman. At an early age, she was introduced to masturbation and other unforeseen challenges. However, God rescued her and continues to mold this woman into divine purpose. Today, and she will share topics people do not often discuss. Tighten your seatbelts and open your heart to hear the story of a beautiful woman of God. Welcome, Coty.
thank you. Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yeah, how are you?
I am great. And it's so wonderful to have you on Raw and Unedited Stories.
Yes, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for reaching out and asking. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Cody, tell our listeners, who is Cody?
Yes. So who am I? Well, just for generally, I am Coty. I am in my young 20s or early 20s, late 20s now, I guess. I'm from the Midwest, so I'm originally from Chicago suburbs, and now live in Florida. Just a regular Christian working. Try my best to get close to God. My ultimate goal is to be very close to Him and receive His peace. That's like the main thing I focus on. And yeah, trying to live in what He's calling me to with music and creative things, and just living my life. I don't know.
Very, very exciting.
Yeah,
So, tell us your story.
yeah. So I grew up in a Christian home. Um, I have two parents, married, went to church every week, involved in things like, Christian version of Girl Scouts, which was GEMS, was involved in youth groups and things like that. So went to Christian school. So I was surrounded by, the Bible and Christianity and things like that. I didn't know as much then. So starting off when I was young, like very young, maybe like maybe 6 years old or seven. I don't remember, but I was introduced to masturbation, unfortunately. And in that introduction, it was both traumatic, but it was also like kind of unknown. I didn't really know what was going on. And it opened doors, spiritually speaking. But of course, I was little, I was young, and I didn't know that. So all I knew is that what is happening, what is this? And eventually learning that, oh, this feels good. And so it turned into an addiction that I struggled with the idea, is this wrong? And then feeling shame, feeling fear of exposure and things like that. So that developed. A lot of that had to do with, being witnessed, like witnessed masturbating at some point. I think it was the first time that it happened when I was introduced. Someone walked in and there was utter shock, utter shame, and just was like, what is going on? And in that moment, I felt the shame. So not only was there the open door of masturbation and lust spiritually, there was the open door of shame at the same time. So in that, now I'm struggling with masturbation as I grow up, just from an early age, introduced to even like, thoughts of wanting to be with, men and like romantics and stuff like that, because that was an open door that opened up pretty early, starting my puberty too soon, basically, but also hiding in that shame and not realizing it. And fast forward to like middle school, I believe that first open door, or those first couple open doors, kind of left open doors for the devil to chain me up in more things. So I remember in seventh grade, we watched Disturbia on like the night of the Halloween, or like, as a Halloween thing. Back then, I guess I was doing that. We watched Disturbia, which isn't typically a very scary movie, but I was scared. And that night, I experienced my first episode of sleep paralysis. So now that was entertaining. If anyone doesn't know what that is, it's basically when your body is paralyzed and you can't move, you can't talk. I couldn't talk or say anything, even if I could move my mouth. My eyes could move, and I could see, and I was awake, but I couldn't move my body. And I say sleep paralysis because a lot of times it happens, when people just wake up or go to sleep. But eventually, as years went on for me, sleep paralysis kept coming, right? Maybe it lasted 30 seconds or a minute, 20 seconds. I would, it seemed like forever, but as it kept coming, it wasn't always when I was sleeping or even going to sleep. Sometimes I was just laying down, it was bright daylight, or it was night. Often it was dark and it was nighttime. But I didn't even have to be going to sleep, trying to sleep, but it would happen. So as that was occurring, I felt like, especially the first time, that the more it came, it seemed like it was more than just, oh, this is a natural bodily, biological thing. It seemed spiritual, and at the time, I didn't know spiritual things. Yes, I grew up in a Christian home, but we didn't talk much about the Holy Spirit or spiritual things. We just talked about Jesus and what we saw in the Bible, somewhat. Um, so I just felt like it was the devil, though, and I would
Mhm.
always pray to get out of it. I'm sorry, but I would.
Yes, yes.
Yes, and I would always pray to get out of it, and it didn't always work, in terms of like right away, and I just kept experiencing for a long time. So now we have, still addicted to masturbation. This is middle school, now getting into high school. Still addicted to masturbation, still covered in shame without realizing it, and we have sleep paralysis. And around the same time, middle school, high school, depression started to hit harder. So things were occurring like, realizing financial situations with the home, realizing, like in terms of poor financial situations with the home, realizing, oh, I'm starting to grow up, getting into high school, more pressure on myself to succeed in school so that I could get into a good college, so I can get a good job, so I won't have to deal with financial pressures that my family is dealing with now. More of feeling shame or feeling guilt over like a death in the family, that I didn't interact with them well enough, and things like that started to get worse and worse. More anxiety, wanting to have a boyfriend. Even in eighth grade, just like I said, I was introduced to just those ideas way early. Um,
Right. Cody,
yeah,
I just want to interject here a little bit
yeah.
and ask you, how did the series of masturbation impact your self-esteem as a teenager, and how did it impact you in terms of finding relationship with opposite sex?
That's a good question. That's because that's the thing, because I don't think at the time I knew that it was impacting me. I knew that it was impacting me in terms of I feel guilty. Eventually, I learned, right, that it was wrong, and I feel guilty of doing it. And even before I learned it officially, I felt like there was probably something wrong with it. But I don't know. I don't think I realized that it impacted me until way later.
Mhm.
And even as much when I got married, how much it impacted me. So I think, but what I do think, I think it opened up, the I the the desire for intimacy, the desire for physical touch, the desire to want to be loved properly, and things like that. So I think even, I yes. So because of that, I feel like from an early age, I wanted to be in a relationship. That was like my ultimate hopes and dreams and goals, was to be with someone, really desiring that love from them. And of course, there's some therapy needed. I think there was some
Yes.
deeper things involved in terms of who introduced me and in terms of, how it happened.
All
But
right. And let me ask it. Let me ask it another way.
okay.
Did you have healthy relationships with other of your peers, with your peers, and with
Mm.
boys and girls? And did you feel like you were pretty? Did you feel like you were less than?
No, that's a good question. So in terms of healthy relationships, so I had friends, I had girlfriend like friends that were girls, and I think those were fine. I did have insecurities that developed even more so when now people are older and they tease, or now it matters more to look good because now you can get into relationships and things like that. I had insecurities like they just grew and grew more in terms of how I looked and things like that. I think I wanted to be in a relationship, but when it came down to being in a relationship and I got the opportunity, I was scared to be in the relationship. And I think a lot had to do with I wasn't confident in myself, nor I was just nervous at all that it required that I wouldn't measure up um, until later. And I think a lot of it was because of that shame that came. So, and the guilt, the shame tied with the guilt that I was feeling. But mainly the shame really hid me and made me feel like I was gross, feel like I was just not worthy of, of proper love and just less valued. And I just took what I could get in terms of relationships as I later on when I finally was okay dealing with guys and was open to being in relationships. But it's kind of
Yes, I understand. And I know you were introduced to masturbation at an early age.
mhm.
And as you became a teenager, it continued, and even as a young adult. Let's talk about um, how you responded when you saw movies, and also when you read books with love, romantic books, and things like that. Let's talk about that.
No, that's good. I think I will say I'm a big, especially I was a big romance novel reader. So that I feel like was a huge part of me wanting to that relationship because I saw like this is ultimate happiness, right? This is ultimate love. I felt like now I feel like I felt like that shame that I felt and the guilt and the all brought on all fed into the depression that developed. And so my goal was to be happy, right? And I saw that in relationship, and I got that a lot from romance novels. And I think I feel like there was a seed planted with that masturbation addiction or masturbation introduction that led to me really wanting to read romance novels, really believing that was the only happiness. So that was big for me. I didn't have like a limit or a censorship of what I watched or read. It was like I could watch anything or anything like that. I wasn't addicted to porn, or I didn't really watch porn. But to be honest, the things that are on TV are so similar. I mean, it was like soft core, right? So like things on HBO, things on any movies. Um, so it's hard for me to say that that riled me up necessarily. I think in the beginning, for sure, with masturbation addiction, I like to see something to rile me up, whether it was like imagining in my head or like a TV show. But it got so bad, I didn't need anything eventually. But I think it kept that lust spirit, alive for sure. And it was hard to, get away from that because I watched, like I said, anything was tied to the romance idea with all the books that I read. But
Right. So would you say the paralysis was an effect of masturbation? Would you say that all of that experience that you had earlier on in your years, it's you had some demonic influence that caused the paralysis? That's the question.
no, that's a good question. I believe so. I believe that it's allowed open doors to keep opening. The more I'm masturbating, and the more I'm letting shame stay, I believe that was leaving doors open to letting more fear in. And it could very well be because I'm still learning and getting close to God, trying to figure out even my childhood things. But it could very well be my shame caused fear of that stuff coming out, right? So I believe the sleep paralysis is very heavily tied to fear, because that's what it was causing in me, a
Mhm.
very deep spirit of fear. So it could very well be my not wanting me to be exposed, of people to see that or hear that I'm masturbating, and this is what happened to me when I was a child and things like that. Keeping that hidden caused the fear of letting that out, or that ever being discovered, caused a fear, that kind of stuff. So I feel like it did leave an open door to fear. And on a night so close to Halloween, which can be a night filled with fear, and
Mhm.
watching a movie that's supposed to cause fear in people, to me, it makes sense. And to me, I could see how it's related, that sleep paralysis were to come at that point. So yeah, I feel like it was all related and leading up to it.
And the depression, do you think that also had something to do with the depression?
Yeah, I yes, I believe so. And when I say depression, it's really it was a sense of hopelessness, and in the sense of um, it was a lot of things. So my experience was more not hope that I'd ever be happy or filled with joy. I would never see any type of like would have to fake being happy my whole life, right? Not having that hope there. And I think a lot of it was keeping all of that hidden and being filled with so much of that shame and guilt, seeing myself as gross because of what happened and what I keep doing. And then also that intense fear of sleep, or that intense sleep paralysis, thinking that will never go away, and just building more and more fear, as well as the natural pressures of life, like, finances and grades and things like that. That developed into just like an overwhelming feeling of deep sadness that I didn't even try to go deep into. I just kind of just believe that that deep sadness would never leave, and just pretended my way through. It's kind of
Yeah.
hard to explain, but yes.
What changed? What changed after years of having that experience? What changed?
Well, I know when I got to college, I'd be surrounded by people who talked about God. Again, I said I went to a Christian college. You'd think that was the case, but you didn't necessarily need to talk to God, because you're Christian. You don't need to talk about it. But when I got to college, people had Bible studies, and people actually brought up Jesus and studied what the Bible said. And in that, I got closer to God through that. I was still wilding out. I was still dealing with masturbation and sleep paralysis and things. But I believe as I got closer to God, some of those things were able to shed. So before I even really got close to God and received Holy Spirit, my masturbation addiction ended. And I believe it's because in my 4 years of college, as I was going to Bible studies, getting close to God, I learned that I wanted to actually, I, instead of just trying to get away with things, right? Trying to get away, go around the bush with sin, do anything that wasn't technically what people said was sin. I truly wanted to do what was right the most, like get closest to being right with everything. And I knew that God, I knew that there were consequences, but I knew that God was guiding us lovingly with, what He says in the Word in terms of not sinning. So, for example, with my masturbation addiction, um, trying to see how to concisely say this, but basically, even when I was messing up, but I was getting close to God at the same time, and I was in a relationship that really I started to do things that I wouldn't normally typically do, and I started
Mhm.
to be convicted in it. And I wasn't used to necessarily conviction hard when it came to that kind of stuff. I guess I'll say. But I started to realize the things that I was doing was wrong, and I was praying to God. I was actually praying to God, which also wasn't a typical thing. But I was praying to God, and um, realizing He was convicting me. I was doing wrong things, but I wasn't willing to give up the relationship. And it wasn't until that relationship I was being cheated on, in a sense, and
Mhm.
I found out, and that was a crushing, like, wake-up call for me to see that God was truly trying to lead me into the right direction, which wasn't in this relationship. It was away from not only doing the bad things, but the bad situation. And I saw that um, I related that crushing hurt consequence to the bad things I was doing. And part of that was the masturbation. And so it was like a wake-up call for me. Somehow God gave me the strength to just never do it again. Just
Yeah.
from that, it was that crushing. That consequence was so crushing, and I saw that it was God's love in that crushing, that I did not ever want to do that masturbation again.
And Coty, I was just getting to that.
Okay.
I'm glad you said God's love,
Hmm.
because I'm thinking you are feeling more confident in His love. And because of that, it helped you, or helped to deliver you from that habit of
Yeah,
masturbation. Am I correct?
I believe that's what it was. It was His loving grace, even in His conviction, um, in His guidance, and showing me there's a better way. And I saw how this didn't help me. This made it worse. Basically, it was a true wake up call. Yes.
And you are also associating with people who love God, and
Yeah,
also
that helped.
supported you, and you were spending more time in the Word. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, yes, yes.
And did you feel led to share this with a group, your inner circle?
Share my testimony.
No, share the habit that you were having.
So
Did you feel led to share it at all with anyone?
that's the thing. The first time I shared it was on my YouTube channel. Or actually, no, the first time I shared it, I wrote a blog post about it and I put it on my website, and I shared it on social media. So I had not shared it personally with people before then. Um, I think for me, it was easier to bear sharing it digitally and then receiving comments instead of saying it to people's faces. Now, since then, I have, but um, yeah. So even in that time, it was too hard. It was
Yes.
too hard at that time. Yeah.
So I'm so happy that you got to that point of deliverance through His Word. I'm hearing, and spending time with Him, and learning of His love for you. Those are three important points.
Yeah.
And I want to find out, how did you manage to find a healthy relationship after?
Oh, I mean, in terms of
The
my
love
marriage
story.
now.
The love story.
Yes. Okay. Well, the crazy part is, even after that relationship that I talked about that broke off that masturbation, um, Jesus still had to teach me some things about finding the right man. So I I created I had some standards in terms of, okay, now I know I want him to be Christian. Now I know, and that's kind of what I went off of. But even in that, I learned the hard way that just because someone's Christian doesn't mean that they're right for you. So in another situationship is what I call them, because they weren't always defined. Um, I was broken and hurt again in terms of really thinking this was the right person. I went into that situationship, and it wasn't until it was over that I went to God to ask, "Hey God, is this the right God for me?" Except it was over, so that was not the right timing. But through that hurt, I learned to go to God first and to ask God, okay, who should I be with, God? Lead me to the right person. Um, and that is how truly I found the right person and who I'm with now. So in my prayer, I ask, of course, God to heal me from the last relationship. But then when He helped heal me and gave me hope for a new relationship, I asked God, what do I do? Okay, now that I want to date again, how do I do this? I don't want to have to date all these different people. I just want to find the right person. And He told me to. It was during the pandemic, so it was during while everything was shut down. By the way, He told me to meet. He told me to meet people that I would not associate myself with normally. And that sounded kind of like rude to me in terms of I didn't know I was like that. I didn't know there were people like that I wouldn't meet. But as I was watching, I watch a lot of Christian YouTubers, and I was trying to seek more on what he meant. The idea of online dating came to mind. And I prayed about it heavily because that was one thing I was scared about. Like, I did not want to meet people on there. And that's what he was referring to. I did not want to associate myself with people on online dating at the time because I believed in the stereotypes of, people are just trying to hook up and there's just slimy people. And I was just scared. But I prayed and I felt like he was saying, yes, go for it. And so when I downloaded some apps and one finally worked, Hinge, and I filtered out to only see Christians. And I asked God about every guy. I was like, God, should I keep talking to this guy? What do you think? Should it be this guy? And things like that. So I got to know a couple people, but essentially, um, I was asking God about them and also tying with some sermons I've listened to about having standards, like what your standards should be on a Christian guy, which is really making sure they have your values, like know your values, the hard nose, as in your Christian values. And that's it. Like, as
Right.
long as they have your values, and of course you get along with them, things like that. Um,
Cody, I was just getting ready to ask you, what are those values?
Yeah, so for so I mean, it can depend on the person, but for me, there were some no, like, first of all, are you close with God? Do you actually have a relationship with Jesus? Was of course, yeah, you need that. Otherwise, we can't. And there are things on like some social issues that had to be a yes or a no. So if you believe in this social issue, then I'm sorry, we can't. We don't match. We won't work well together. Um, in terms of women in the church and like gender roles in marriage or like women in the church in terms of porn or something like that. Like if you think it's okay to watch porn, I'm sorry, like that doesn't work. So things like that, a lot of biblical base um, standards is what I created. Nothing superficial like, hey, are you tall, or hey, do you love sport? Like it could depend, but like, hey, are you really good at softball or basketball? I tried to take out all the superficial and only based it on biblical things. I wanted to make sure that we matched in value what was my core. Um, so that's what I would recommend for
Yeah.
sure,
Okay,
figuring that out.
thank you. And so you eventually found your shining knight in
Yes,
shining armor. Talk to us about what drew you to him, and
yeah,
how did you find out, and how did you know that this man was the man that God said,
yeah.
that
No,
God said, okay, it's fine, go ahead.
yeah, that's a good question. So, like I said, I was on Hinge. I actually found him first, and I messaged him, and he, messaged me back, and we started talking. And I realized it was very easy to talk with him. But right up front, we in the beginning, we got those hard questions out the way to make sure we weren't wasting our time. So we talked about spiritual gifts. Do you believe in spiritual gifts and the Holy Spirit, spiritual things? We talked about the hard things that I mentioned earlier on, like, um, do you think porn is okay? Do you believe in, what do you think about women in the church and like things like that? Um, how's your relationship with Jesus? Things like that we talked about right up front. So that was helpful to see that we were on the same page. So I knew like, okay, now you're a contender, right? And I think what really drew me to him was my comfortability with him. So he was the first person I shared my, like, the true specifics of my testimony and the true specifics of the masturbation addiction. So the fact that I was comfortable enough to share that with him, no judgment, and he was comfortable enough to share his story with me, really showed me like this person could be right for me. And as we continued to talk, we actually got mentors in our relationship. So we got a couple who had been married several years, who were Christian, to walk us through our relationship so that it wasn't just about feelings. And they helped us, ask the hard questions, make sure our boundaries were set. We had boundaries. We didn't talk after 9 p.m. We weren't being huggy, touchy feely, things like that, to make sure it wasn't just based on lust or emotion or passion. I mean, And eventually there was a point where we both knew we loved each other, but we technically didn't want to say it too soon. And I was freaking out one day because I didn't know how I was feeling. I was trying to figure out my emotions. I was feeling anxiety or something. And I went to my counselor actually, and I was like, I'm feeling all of these things for this person, and I'm feeling all of these bottled up emotions. I don't know what's going on. And I finally told her, like, I think I love him, but I don't know, like, it was crazy. And I just opened up to her, and she's like, hey, I think you're in love and it's okay.
Yeah.
And after finally settling with that emotion, because I was scared because of all the hearted, I felt broken hearts before. So after feeling that emotion, I finally was ready to go to God and be like, you're right. Like, this is how I feel. Now that we both know how I feel, God, lead me. Like, what is this the right person in terms of marriage? Even though the whole time he was leading me that way, I was just scared. So he really just helped me see that it was a lot of the nerves. I was just holding on to nerves when I didn't need to, and gave me that permission fully when I finally released it all to him, while also doing the same with Joshua. He gave it to him way
Yeah.
earlier on, but yeah.
Yes. Yes. Coty, talk to our young people who are experiencing the same, because I know for sure that there are many young people who struggle with the same. And after you're done, I really have another question to ask
Okay. So
related to that. Yes.
when you mean struggle with the same, um,
Masturbation, the issue of masturbation.
yes,
Talk to them about the positive and the negative, just the negatives of that,
yeah,
and the positive of getting the deliverance from it.
yeah. So there's multiple things here. So I feel like with masturbation, it really opens spiritual doors to other things the devil can now has permission to attack with, right? So one, repentance every time really matters because of that. But I will say, it not only opens those doors. So, like I said, he can, try to come with sleep paralysis and other things, but it also deforms um, what our sexual desires are supposed to be, how they're supposed to be, like how they're supposed to be. What's the word? Basically, how we're supposed to tap
Express.
into our express. Thank you. So like how we're supposed to tap into our sexual desires properly, and that's within marriage. And now with me being married, I saw the difference. With masturbation, it's a skewed version, and it messes up what it could really be like with your marriage. It makes you think it's supposed to be this way when it can be really better in marriage. Um, and it brings things like shame. We don't want to feel shame, and that shame keeps it hidden. So I feel like if anyone's struggling with masturbation, it's other people are too. So it's better to let someone know you're struggling with this, to make that not hidden anymore. Because once it's not hidden, that shame can start to be lifted off. And once that shame is lifted off, now you can have courage and boldness, to go to God about it, even to break that free, to get help from other people, to help you break it free as well. Um, it's there's so many things to masturbation that's just not right. I would just say it's so heavily tied to the spirit of lust, which also messes up your view of both loved and what sexual intimacy should be in a marriage. And it makes it harder when you do get married to be sexually intimate with your spouse, which also causes strife within a marriage. So it ultimately isn't worth it. But I will say the great thing about being broken free from it is not only feeling God's grace, of course, and not doing it, but being able to appreciate the intimacy you get with your spouse when it's not just by yourself. Well, you can really see how that gets you closer to your spouse versus you just feeling a feeling. Um, yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
Thank you, and that's a wonderful mouthful to help our young people. And I want to talk about the issue of forgiveness.
Mm.
The person who introduced you to masturbation and almost destroyed your life. Did you get a chance to forgive?
No, that's a good question. Yeah, so I did. It took a long time for me to it took a long time for me to even get to a point like to face the fact of forgiveness, because a lot of the blame I put on myself. Because even though I was introduced by somebody else and I was led and didn't know what was going on, because I continued, I put the blame on myself. I barely considered the other person, but I saw emotionally I did, and I was angry with that person emotionally, but I didn't realize I didn't realize that that was the root of my anger for that person. I thought it was just, I don't know, there. So a few years ago, I realized I was angry, I was irritated, and didn't like being around that person as much because of that root. And so I had to go to God and ask for help for forgiveness for that person. And finally, I think after I first released my video, that person was able to talk with me about it as well, saying, explaining their side, which helped me, of course, understand better of the situation, and then also be able to fully let go and just I've forgiven, but still wanting to work on the relationship, right? And let that anger and irritation be gone. So
Yeah. Our pop culture seem to propagate the need for masturbation. They're saying, oh, a woman or a man should know, first of all, about themselves before they can be fully satisfied with someone else. Speak to that.
that's so hurtful. I would say the great thing about sex and sexual intimacy in a marriage is that you can figure that out with your spouse. Um, and I know when you're figuring it out by yourself first, with masturbation or however it is, you're only feeling the the actual feeling and pleasure of it versus the intimacy that you're supposed to feel versus the relation to your spouse that you're supposed to feel. So when you're getting the trying to first figure yourself out first, and then you get into a marriage, it blocks kind of like you it blocks you from realizing that this is more than just sexual intimacy. There's more here, and that you're really getting close to your spouse. You're really becoming one because you're only thinking about the pleasure of it. I don't. It's hard to explain, but that's kind of like how I was feeling through a lot of it, because you take away so much of the goodness that God created when you're just doing it with yourself. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think you explained it quite simple and clear.
that's good.
And I want to ask you, who is delivered Cody?
Who is
What is delivered Cody doing with herself now?
Yeah. So delivered Cody is finally feeling joy again. A joy that comes truly supernaturally, I feel, um, and pursuing peace and feeling often peace that God gives, while literally feeling and witnessing the shame leaving as I continue to get closer to God. Um, and I'm able to freely pursue what God's calling me to without the fear blocking it. Whether that's the music that I'm putting out, whether that's more ministry things that I'm putting out, working, all those things that God's actually leading me to. I have hope that I can actually get there. That gives me more and more joy. So, yeah,
Thank you for that. Cody, before we close this session, use this time to just share anything that you think it is necessary to help somebody or even young Cody.
yeah. I'll say, you may think, you know, you may think it's hopeless, or you may be feeling hopeless with whether it's a masturbation addiction or depression or anxiety or feel like God hates you, or feel like you can't get close to God, or that there's just no hope in feeling any better in life. But I will say, when you truly work hard and try, when you truly try, I'll say, not work hard necessarily, but try to get to know who God is, try to build a relationship, and that means talking to Him and just truly being open and being willing. That means reading the Bible. You will see such a difference, and being intentional in that, setting time aside to just like any friendship or any relationship you've been in, setting time aside to intentionally truly look after Him, seek after Him. You will see a difference in your life with how He responds.
Thank you. Thank you. Cody, tell us about your single.
Oh, yes. So I have a new single, my first produced single coming out. So it's released on YouTube already. It's called Drunk on the Spirit. And it's coming out and streaming on October 21st, Friday. It'll be on all streaming platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, all the different platforms. Just about the joy and the joy you feel when you feel the Holy Spirit in you, just what He does in me when I'm feeling. So it's called Drunk on the Spirit, and yeah, you can search it on YouTube or any streaming platform starting October 21st. So I'm super excited.
I'm excited for you too. Can
Yeah.
you give us a snippet?
Oh man. um. Oh man. Can I give a snippet? Um. Let me think. Let me think which part. I'll give a small little part.
Yes.
Okay. No need for a drink to get drunk. Just fell to my knees and I sung, been drowning in His presence. It's a
Aw-
small little snippet.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Cody,
Thank you.
for just giving us your story, your heart. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sure many listeners will benefit from your story, especially young people. Thank you so much, Cody. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to Raw and Unedited Stories. And everybody has a story. If you have a story to share, you can contact us in the link below and we will reach out to you. Please remember to subscribe, share, and like. Have a phenomenal day.